Hello, I'm Gary Dye. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives, District 3, State of Oregon. This is going to be my official campaign video. I'm going to be rambling on and on and on. Um, I hope you stay tuned because I got a lot of interesting things to say. Let's start with my life. I was born in Portland, Oregon. My mother was born and raised in Russia, and at when she was 4 years old, the KGB came to her door at like 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "You have a an hour to pack. We're sending you to the camp, the Gulag." So she and her family went there. She remembers the train ride in the boxcar along with all these other people, political prisoners. Her dad was a colonel in the White Russian Army, and she remembers that. Eventually, they got out of the gulag, and my mother became a nurse, and she was working in Minsk, and she that's when the Germans invaded Russia, and there was this panic in the hospital that she worked in, and they said, we need to go hide in the woods." So a bunch of people went and hide in the woods, doctors and nurses. My mother didn't do that. And the Germans rounded those people up because they thought that they were partisans or something and hanged them all. Didn't hang my mom because she didn't go and hide in the woods. Anyway, she was treated very well by the Germans. However, she had a friend who wrote her a letter, and that friend said they thought that uh, the Germans were going to lose the war, and the Gestapo didn't like that. So they rounded her up and they rounded my mother up, threw my mother in the concentration camp. A German lieutenant or a colonel went and got my mom out of the camp and sent her to his farm in Western Germany. And that's how she came to the United States because after the war, Stalin would have had her executed or sent to another Gulag camp because he considered everybody that got behind the lines as being traitors. My dad was 10th of 10 kids in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma, and very, very poor. Uh, when he was 11 years old, he was caddying for the local golf course, the local country club, and he stood a little bit too close to the guy who swang back and hit my dad right there and took out his eye at 11 years old. And he had to live with that for the rest of his life. Anyway, so my mom and dad had very hard lives, and they somehow got together and got married within like a couple of months of meeting. And so they had me and my brother, who's 2 years older than me, and they immediately bought a house, a 760 square foot house in outer southeast Portland, no garage, very small house, of course. I didn't think it was small when I grew up, but later on, after I got in college, I kind of realized how small that house was, and that basically we were kind of poor because my dad, things caught up with him. So he kind of like had nervous breakdowns and kind of like lost his mind between the ages of 40 and 50. Uh, After 50, he got out of it and was a normal person there since then. That environment caused me to kind of like become introspective and very, very studious. I went to when I went to school, I was only maybe the only person who got home homework, and I always had like three books that I would carry home. And I preferred the hard science type stuff, so I was really good at math and chemistry and physics, but I didn't really know what to do in life. And so finally, I decided, well, hey, I'm good at chemistry and physics and math. How about chemical engineering? So that's what I majored in at Oregon State University. I had no clue what a chemical engineer really did, but I heard they made a lot of money, and that was what was important for my mother. My mother always said to me, Gary, you want to use your mind. You don't want to use your body. You want to use your mind when you work. They make good money. So the fact that I was going to school to become an engineer pleased her very much. Um, anyway, yeah, at David Douglas High School, I had a reputation, and I was voted the Albert Einstein of 1977. That was me. I guess I was the class geek and maybe even nerd. I don't know. Um, so yeah, I went to Oregon State University and studied chemical engineering. Actually, I was a double major in math up until my senior year. Then I dropped that. Um, and up until my after my junior year, where I had a summer job at the Union Oil Refinery in Los Angeles, I still didn't know what the heck a chemical engineer did. Um, but I had a pretty good 3 months down there. Kind of had some fun, everything. And so when I did graduate from Oregon State, uh, I got a job with Shell Oil Company in Anacortes, Washington, 250 miles north of Portland, and they paid really good money. Um, However, it wasn't more than a month or two on that job that I realized that I didn't like what I was doing, and I didn't know what else to do. I was kind of like stuck. Um, and I spent another 5 years or so in Anacortes, Washington. And throughout that, I got to know what other kinds of jobs there were in the oil refining industry of Shell Oil Company. And I didn't like anything that I saw. So, pretty darn early on, I was trying to figure out how in the world do I get out of this mess? How do I get out of the oil refinery? Um, so then I got transferred to Los Angeles in the Wilmington refinery for Shell Oil. And I immediately said, well, actually, maybe I ought to get an MBA degree because, MBAs are looked well upon, I guess, and might help me in my career. So I did that. I went to Pepperdine University, uh, basically, night school for like maybe like 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years. I did that. Um, but actually, it kind of turned out that um, I still didn't see any good job that I would enjoy at Shell Oil Company, even with an MBA. So actually, it kind of turned out that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I had a lot of weird ideas, maybe inventions and stuff like that. And so I kind of wanted to do that. Uh, um, However, basically, I got switched to a different kind of a job at the oil refinery, and it wasn't a very good job. And so finally, I said, "Hey, I want to go back to school and do math and physics. My real passion. I didn't know what a chemical engineer did. Um, so, you know, I quit my job after 8 years at Shell and went to school at University California at Irvine, and I did get my MBA degree too, and studied math and physics at I think I was 31 or something, 31 years old, I think. Um, and that was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. Um, However, I started to panic because I didn't think I had the talent to get a PhD in math or physics. Because you almost had to have a PhD to do anything in math or physics. I didn't want to be a teacher, um, and so I was really doubting I could do that. I definitely didn't think I could do it in mathematics. Um, uh, that was becoming more and more difficult for me. Physics, so. But I could see that my chances of getting back into chemical engineering, getting back to oil refining was maybe slowly slipping away. I'd been out of that for like a couple of years or so. So basically, I picked up the phone and got a job in Saudi Arabia. So I ended up getting both my mathematics degree and bachelor's degree and my physics bachelor's degree. And then I went to Saudi Arabia, and it was there. I was a single guy, right? They don't allow you to do much in Saudi Arabia back then, at least. And during lunches, we would have these political arguments and stuff. And I kind of realized that I didn't I maybe I was arguing for argument's sake, and I didn't really like that. So I came up with this grand plan to put out my book of philosophy. Um, I just been introduced to Ayn Rand a few years earlier, and I kind of liked what she had to say about objectivism uh, and the virtue of selfishness. Uh, and so I was kind of leaning in her direction, but I kind of realized there were a lot of things I didn't really agree with her. And so I sat down over the course of maybe a couple of years, or maybe it was a year, and I typed out my book of philosophy from A to Z. Um, the title of the book was called The Technical Details of Happiness. And it really was, from A to Z, starting out with logic, then physics, you know, uh, religion type things. Then it got into science and biology and uh, human beings, and then government and all this stuff. Is basically a grand theorem. It was a grand theorem, starting from nothing and getting to basically policies for a person to live out their own life and policies that a government should adopt. Okay. Um, so I put in 3 years there, and I decided that I want to be I want to become a lawyer, even though I wanted to go to law school uh, to maybe fulfill something of a political career or maybe become a patent lawyer. Um, and so I quit that job after 3 years and enrolled in Northwest School of Law in Portland. I always wanted to get back to Portland somehow. I didn't know how to do it with my resume in oil refining. There are no oil refineries in Portland, Oregon, or even near Portland, Oregon. Um, so yeah, I came back and did law school, and I'll get into that a little bit later. What happened with that? But after about one semester, I realized that I didn't want to be an attorney, and I didn't like law school at all. It was a whole different kind of learning. Uh, my hard science stuff, you read a couple pages and they tell you exactly what you're supposed to know and learn um, in those couple of pages, and you do your exercises and stuff. But law school was a lot different. You're supposed to read like 60 pages and figure it out yourself. What's the issue and all that kind of stuff. It's totally different. And I didn't do well on my first exams, which has really knocked me out because, again, I lost my confidence and I didn't know if I could get through law school. I didn't know if I could pass the bar exam. And so basically, I quit law school and and um, and then I got back into oil refining again. I went back to Saudi Arabia and worked in a much, much worse place there. It was a terrible environment to work. So, I lasted a year and a half there, and that was it. Um, let's circle back a little bit. I mentioned I did have a brother, and my brother and I went kind of like separate directions, even though we shared a bedroom, a little teeny tiny bedroom, our whole lives at that teeny tiny house. We kind of went different ways. Our dad, who basically, had a meltdown between, the ages of 40 and 50. It affected us differently. My brother became more extroverted and stuff, and uh, he worked at Taco Bell and saved up enough money to get a cool Camaro. I went the other direction. I went introverted, and studying stuff in school and everything like that. But my brother, he became a mailman, which is a pretty good job for not having any secondary education, or he didn't go to college. But he wasn't satisfied with his lot in life, and so he thought maybe he should grow some marijuana in his house. And that's what he told me. I wasn't living in Portland anymore. I was, up in Anacortes, Washington, and he was making quite a bit of money uh, with that. Uh, but then, um, toward the end of, and then he had a kid. He had a couple of kids too. He got married and got a couple of kids, and she joined the operation. And so he got caught with his partner, and his partner basically ratted on him, made things a lot worse for him because basically the first person who confesses to the police, they get off scot free. And so that guy went and confessed and pointed everything to my brother. My brother was in big trouble. That guy had a gun. My brother never had a gun, and the police found the gun underneath his rug in his car, and it was his car. But the guy said, "Oh, no, no, that was his gun," you know. And of course, the police would believe that. They'd believe everything that the guy tells him, right, to get evidence and to maybe testify in court against his partner. So my brother was in pretty big trouble, and that was actually when I was in law school. So it was weighing heavily on me. I didn't want his life to be ruined. That was the drug war back then. And so, that weighed heavily on me, and I basically quit law school. And yeah, well, I decided to get another job in Saudi Arabia the second time, And what happened is that I had bought a house at that time for law school, and I actually filled it up with renters that went to law school along with me. And my brother, he had to come back because, the cops caught him and he was in trouble, and all of a sudden he didn't have any money. So he was living in my house too. And I went to Saudi Arabia and I was working there, not very happily. And all of a sudden I get a call from the district attorney or something for the city of Portland, I think it was. And he said, "You've been indicted." I said, What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, well, we raided your house in Portland, and your brother was growing marijuana there." And I'm going, "Huh? Well, that wasn't me." So, well, actually, it was you. Um, your brother's partner said you were involved, and you were actually the ringleader. You're the drug kingpin. And I said, "No, that's not true at all. That's crazy." And so, I basically, the drug wars were so bad back then that I had to come back to Portland. The DA agreed that all I would have to do is admit that I had done the crime, and then I could go back to Saudi Arabia. And at that point in time, I'm thinking, all I have to do is put in a few more years in Saudi Arabia, and I'd have enough money to retire, at 35 or late 40, late 30s or something like that. So, I got this rinky-dink lawyer, and I spent like $1,000 on him. And so I flew into town, and so then their story changed. I came home on like a 2-week vacation, right? And they they changed their mind. They wouldn't let me fly back. So basically, I had to call up the Saudi Arabians and say, "Hey, I've decided I don't like that job, and I'm staying here. Sorry, bye." And because I didn't want to, yeah, yeah. When the DA called me earlier, he said, "Well, you got to come in, or else we're going to call up the Saudi Arabian authorities and tell them that you're a drug kingpin." And Saudi Arabians, they kill people. They execute them. They chop off their heads. I saw that on their news. Some guy was caught dealing drugs or something, and they took him to the public square or the main mosque in Jeddah, and they beheaded him, with a sword. That's what they did. So I said, "Well, I don't want any of that." So that's why I came back to Portland and to confess or whatever. But they had other plans, and so that ended that. So I pled guilty to a Class A felony. Class A felony. I'm just a nerd. I don't know anything about. I don't know how to grow marijuana. I wasn't smoking marijuana, right? And yeah, Class A felony. And I didn't quite get that, but I didn't think anybody it would matter. I'm this engineer guy. They don't do background checks on engineers, right? They're not gonna think that I grew marijuana or did anything else in the drug business, you know. So, I anyway, uh, yeah, I got a further job in the oil industry with Baker Petrolite back in Houston, and yeah, that was a lousy job too, and I didn't like that one very much at all. Basically, I got fired from that. uh, and then I came back to Portland and I got a job with Northwest Natural Gas as a measurement engineer. And that was a interesting experience. I really liked the job because I was free to do all this stuff. My boss wasn't technical. And I could do all this innovative stuff to make sure the measurement of the gas was more accurate, making the bill more accurate, right? However, when I was there, I decided that, well, I found out very, very quickly that the company was crooked. Basically, they're cheating people. They're not doing the things they were supposed to do to make sure that the meter is accurate and some of these other things having to do with creating the bill, the pressure, the temperature of the gas, and also the BTU value of the gas. Uh, they were doing some really bad things. I got handed off a bunch of bad stuff, you know. And so what could I do? You know, I couldn't be, well, basically, I went into people's offices and closed the door and said, "Hey, I made these veiled threats that you need to do this, that, and the other thing, or else the Oregon Public Utility Commission might find out and you'd be in big trouble and maybe even get fired or something." So I was doing a lot of that, and I wasn't making any friends doing that, right? I became known as someone who was not a company player. Um, but the biggest thing was the way they calculated the BTU value of the gas. Basically, how much heat is going to be produced when um, when you burn a cubic foot of gas. How much heat is it? Obviously you want to have more heat coming out of that. And the gas bill is based on the energy. It's based on the heat produced. It's not based on the volume of gas, right? But they had a method of doing that, which was totally, it was a joke for a couple of reasons. And I had very early on came up with a new method of calculating the BTU value. It was innovative. Nobody in the world was doing that, but I thought it could be easily done with this certain kind of software, which we were already using to do pressure calculations. But my boss thought a dime spent on measurement issues was a dime wasted. Uh, and since we were getting away with these really terrible measurement policies, um, he just could not. Um, he couldn't approve of any significant money spent on correcting our measurement methods and policies and stuff. So I was fighting him for like 9 or 10 years on this issue. I pulled out. I was friends with this one engineer who was handling the software, and I got him to produce the model to demonstrate how this would work, but they wouldn't do it. Okay, so uh, around 2009, um, there was this issue where a bunch of people, 50,000 people, whatever, were getting low BTU valued gas, but it wasn't calculated as low BTU volume gas, on their bill. So basically, they were overpaying. They were overpaying like maybe 7% or so. Uh, and the thing is, this low BTU value gas, was going to Oregon City and West Linn at these two very, very large paper mills. Paper mills are the largest users of natural gas. They have huge, huge meters. They use like a cup, 10, maybe 10, $20 million per year of natural gas, each of uh, these paper mills. And so one of them, the engineer called up the segment manager at Northwest Natural and said, "Hey, I don't understand why we're using so much gas. We checked everything here. Is there something going on?" And we couldn't tell him. We couldn't tell him. We couldn't adjust his bill to be correct because we would have to adjust everybody's bill in that BTU zone, 50,000 people, and we wouldn't know exactly who had the low value gas and who didn't. There was no method, there was no legal method to correct his bill. You can't show favoritism, right? So basically, the second manager lied to the guy, put it off, and then the situation changed back and everything was okay. But the thing is, like a year later, one of the paper mills uh, went bankrupt, and like 170 people lost their union wage, family wage jobs, right? And they shouldn't have, uh, because they paid way too much for their gas at certain times of the year. That might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. So, um, that really struck me. It struck my conscience. Um, I kind of realized that, going behind closed doors and getting people to do stuff, it wasn't working. It wasn't working, especially like this BTU thing that's going on, and it was really playing on my conscience. And, I had earlier married someone and we had a couple of kids and we were kind of like dependent on the paycheck like everybody else, right? And so I was really scared throughout all my years of losing that job because, I wanted to come back to Portland. I was stuck in Portland. Um, this job was not transferable. Natural gas company is a monopoly. I can't take my job and go across town, use it anywhere else. There's no oil refineries. I couldn't go back to my oil refining career. So I was kind of stuck. And um, basically, well, I took medical leave because it was bothering me so much. I actually, for the first time in my life, I sought counseling and started taking some depression pills. Um, so when I got home, when I was staying home on medical leave, I decided to report internally uh, the things that I had seen in the previous 10 years of my existence. I reported basically 24 ethical violations. Some were pretty big, some were kind of small, but it was like 24 ethical violations. I reported them internally to the as the code of ethics violations to the appropriate attorneys in the company. And so that got that off my back. I did that, right? And so I think it was a month or two later, I finally came back to work and I kind of like, so they said, yeah, well, we're working on this, Gary. We're working. They sent a couple people to ask me questions and everything. And well, um, one of the first things when I got back was that my other new boss said, "Well, Gary, um, we realized when you were gone, boy, if you were to get hit by a beer truck, and took you out, we would be in big, big trouble because we didn't know how you did all these things for us. I had some pretty spectacular spreadsheets and did this, that, and the other thing um, that only I knew how to do. So he had someone shadow me, and my assignment, my top priority, was to have her sit behind me and I explain anything and everything about these spreadsheets and everything else. I had to spill everything I knew to this person. Well, I knew what that meant. It meant that they were going to get rid of me. And they had to get rid of me but still function. They wanted to pass off all of my knowledge and everything to someone new. Pretty dirty deal. But at that point, I said, "Oh my God, this is horrible. What did I get myself into?" But I kind of realized that, you know what? These people are in big trouble. They've done a lot of illegal things, breaking regulations that were agreed to with the Oregon Public Utility Commission, you know? Um, so I started playing this game, and the company was going to um, expand this mist gas, this low-valued BTU gas, such that they could send more of it to Salem and more of it to East Portland, you know? And again, we had no way of measuring this BTU value of this low BTU value gas. It was going to be an incredible ripoff, right? So I got on the computer and sent out emails, kind of like a protest. And I did save one email of my boss during that incident with the paper mills, where another manager had said in black and white, "I hope the OPUC does not catch us uh, cheating our customers like this." And my boss, who was on that email also, said, "Oh, you can't say that. Don't you ever say anything like that again." And blah blah blah. And said, "Well, boy, our measurement is top notch, like no other in the world." He was covering himself. Well, I saved that email and I produced it. I sent this email to 15 or 20 managers, directors, and vice presidents so that they couldn't deny that they didn't know what was going on here, right? I could always point to this email saying, "You got this email, so you knew exactly what was going on and it was wrong." Well, that didn't go very well, and then the report about my reporting of the ethical violations came back, and the person in charge of that said that they couldn't find any ethical violations or bad business practices. Thank you very much, Mr. Dye, for doing your duty and reporting this, but go back to your job and we'll take care of anything. And so I said, "Well, I don't understand this. I don't understand why this, and this is not an ethical violation." Like one of the things was that they were withholding $35,000 deposit from the bankruptcy court for this paper mill that went bankrupt. They had filed Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 earlier, and when they came out of that, they had to post a $35,000 deposit with Northwest Natural to keep receiving gas, right? But Northwest Natural wanted to keep it. And the manager of the credit department, he brought me in his office for some unknown reason, closed the door, and admitted that they had this $35,000 that they're withholding from the bankruptcy court. You're not supposed to do that. You know, all of the assets are supposed to go into this pile, and then the bankruptcy court is supposed to then dole out these assets to people according to how the bankruptcy judge feels it should go, right? But Northwest Natural wanted to hang on to $35,000. They didn't want to give that up. So why isn't that unethical? That's unlawful. Well, they didn't answer that question. And so there became this little bit of a shouting match between me and her, by text message. And basically, the following Monday, I came to work, and someone came to my office. Says, Gary, we need to talk to you. Can we talk to you downstairs on the first floor? And basically, they said they put me on administrative leave, and that was the last day I had ever spent at Northwest Natural. Um, I never went there again. I was 12 years with them, and basically, 2 or 3 months later, I received this box by courier. They cleaned out my office and my desk, sent me that with a stupid letter saying, you know, that I was fired. I was terminated for whistleblowing. Um, you're not supposed to be able to terminate people for whistleblowing. Whistleblowers are a protected class. Uh, but so I actually got an attorney and sued them for wrongful termination. And I thought I had a lot of good things there. And again, I thought, what was on my side was that Northwest Natural Gas did not want any of this to go out in the public. How they'd been cheating the public for all these years, cheating on their measurement practices for all these years. I had all this evidence. I knew all about it. I'm the expert in measurement. I was a national expert in measurement. I was on the American Gas Association's Distribution Measurement Committee. I was vice president of the Western Gas Measurement Short Course Association. You know, People looked up to me across the country as one of the experts in gas measurement. That was me. Um, I was really surprised they were going to pull this stuff. So yeah, I got an attorney. Unfortunately, it was the wrong attorney, and he didn't give me much confidence that this was a slam dunk. That I was. I think I said, um, "You guys owe me like a $500,000. I was going to retire in 5 or 6 years, and that, and this, that, and whatever." That would have added up to a $500,000. So I want a $500,000. You know. And yeah, so I kind of caved in. I kind of signed a non-disclosure agreement, and they gave me $145,000. You know, and obviously that wasn't worth it. That was almost kind of like a year's pay. It should have been 5 or 6 years' pay, but I only got 1 year's pay, and I didn't get health insurance, retirement health insurance. Um, So that was the end of my career, and that was the end of my working career because obviously I couldn't get a job as a measurement engineer for a gas company since, Northwest Natural was a uh, monopoly and there were no refineries, and nobody is going to hire a 53-year-old engineer to retrain them. You don't do that. You hire a 53-year-old engineer if he can start working the next day. Um, Hold on. So there I was, no longer having a job, uh, and couldn't get a job. Fortunately, though, I saved a lot of money. I invested conservatively and wisely, and I made quite a bit of money when I was in Saudi Arabia. So I didn't need a job, at least. I could live comfortably with what I had, and I could provide for my kids and their college educations. So that really wasn't much of a problem. But thing is, about a month after I was terminated, um, it was my birthday, December 11th, and me and my wife decided to take our kids to see Santa Claus on our birthday at the local mall. And so we did that, and I brought my camcorder, and there wasn't very many people there. It was like Tuesday afternoon, so it's pretty darn empty. And so one of my kids, my son, was just about ready to get on Santa's lap. He was next in line when shots rang out. This is the Clackamas Town Center shooting. And first, I didn't know what the heck it was. Unfortunately, I didn't have my camcorder running. I was just about ready to click the button. And yeah, it was the Clackamas Town Center. I finally figured out because people were scurrying about and heard this bang and glass breaking all over the place. And so I ran to my kids and my wife, and we're there at the end of the mall. So what do we do? Where do we go? What do we hide? What happens now? Everything was at stake. This guy could have killed my whole family. But fortunately, we kind of ran to the escalator, and we did leave the building and was safe and everything. Uh, we got interviewed by local KOIN TV news a couple of times after that because of our experience. Because our kids were just about ready to get on Santa's lap when these shots rang out. And I think the point I want to make here is that I'm still a strong uh, defender of the Second Amendment. I mean, a lot of times when these things happen, when someone is affected, all of a sudden they say, yeah, well, yeah, we should have gun control laws and this, that, and the other thing. I don't believe that. I think the Second Amendment is more than just about me and my life and my family. It's about what we need to have in place in case the government turns tyrannical. You know, we got guns with people that maybe can fight this tyrannical government. Uh, so again, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Unfortunately, that incident really affected my wife, and I don't think she liked it that I was home all the time, getting on her nerves or something. I never did understand, uh, but she wanted a divorce, and I could never justify how she could possibly get a divorce and break up our family. I think my kids were 9 and 7 years old when we got that divorce. I treated her like a queen. Maybe that was my mistake. You know, I tried to give her everything that she wanted, but it wasn't enough. Um, anyway, so we got that divorce, and obviously, men and husbands and fathers don't do well in divorce court. I got screwed royal. But I was able to get my kids 5 days out of 2 weeks during school and every other week in the summer. So I guess that was actually pretty good. But I still felt I was cheated. I was cheated out of my kids' um, growing up years. It has never been the same. You got to have your mom and dad around. Uh, uh, my ex-wife, she destroyed our children's family. their family was destroyed. So I really don't agree with these divorce laws and actually even these marriage laws, but that's another subject. A few years later, during the pandemic, um, my dad, who was 92 years old, he had an older sister who was like 95, and her son did not want anybody to visit her during the pandemic and said, you have to take the COVID vaccine shots before you're going to be able to visit. And, my dad and his sister were pretty darn close throughout their whole lives. So reluctantly, well, I thought my dad should get the shot, but I was on the fence about it. I wasn't really trusting it. It hadn't been out there for very long, so I'm just wondering what kind of after effects or whatever might happen with that thing. However, I did want to visit my aunt, so I agreed with my dad to get the two COVID vaccine shots, Moderna. And the thing is, after the second Moderna shot in on uh, in July of 2001 or 2021, um, 3 days later, uh, my dad was found dead in his chair in his house by my brother who was living with him at the time. Uh, Unexpected, uh, sudden, unexpected. Boom. Found him in his chair, slumped over, dead. I had to have an autopsy performed, and that pathologist said that it looked like it was myocarditis and that he probably had a heart attack. That's all she could really say and determine. There was nothing else she could find. Um, and a month later, after I had taken the same second COVID shot along with my dad, a month later, I had a massive stroke and even a embolism, pulmonary embolism, and that might have cost me my life. I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days after that. Uh, I blame my dad's death, and I blame my stroke and pulmonary embolism on the COVID vaccine, and I can't do anything about that, right? You can't sue the vaccine manufacturers. You can't. They get off scot free. They get hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars for the vaccine in profit, and you can't sue them if you were harmed by the vaccine. I even got another pulmonary embolism a year later, which could have killed me also. That put me in the hospital for a few more days. And now I have to take Eliquis and a statin the rest of my life just in case to try to prevent another embolism, which could kill me. And before that, I never had anything in my blood that would suggest, cholesterol or any kind of clotting thing going on with me. There was no family history of clotting, but that's what I've got to do for the rest of my life. And even though I have just gotten on Medicare, um, the Part D drugs of Medicare, because Eliquis is a tier 3 drug, it's going to cost me like $1,000 a year, I think, something like that, you know. And I guess the pharmaceutical industry is going to profit more because they're going to get $1,000 a year off of me, and probably 4 or 5 times that from the government to pay for these drugs that I believe was caused by taking the COVID vaccine. So that wasn't good. Finally, hold on a second. Uh, okay, that's about it. I'm gonna change my plans here. I'm gonna cut it short. You know, I told you about my life up to now, up until maybe my so-called political career. But I'm gonna end this video and I'm gonna create another video where I'm just gonna talk about my political stuff. My policies and positions and everything like that. Uh, so I will have to terminate this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring for you. I hope I didn't ramble too much, even though I think I did. But I just want to tell you a little bit about me, my background, why I got here, why I am who I am. And I hope you got a good dose of me. So, see you in the next video.